Welcome everyone to the Summon 360 Connect community discussion on Summon Analytics. My name is Susan Wynn. I am the Education and Training Coordinator for the ELUNA Summon 360 Working Group. So just a little bit about the working group, which is sponsoring this session. The Summon 360 Working Group is part of ELUNA, or the Ex Libris Users of North America. And although we have fantastic, excellent support from our Ex Libris staff, especially Scott Schutz, who's running this session for us, the Summon 360 Connect series of presentations and discussions, we really want that to be user community driven. So I would encourage anyone to contact me anytime if you have ideas for future sessions. Relevant to today's topic of analytics, I wanted to mention that our working group does include a liaison to the ELUNA IGLU Analytics Working Group, and her name is Faye O'Reilly, and Faye is with us today. Among many other duties of the working group, we also coordinate the yearly enhancement process. So if today's session inspires some ideas for possible enhancements to Summon Analytics, I would encourage you to add those to the idea exchange. And by the way, these slides will be shared so you don't have to worry about grabbing these links or anything like that. This session is being recorded, and we will share that recording along with the slides to the Summon list. So what we're going to do today, we're going to start with a few really quick polls to get to know each other a little bit. We have 3 Summon Analytics users who will share their experiences to kick off our conversation. We will hold questions for the discussion leaders until after they have finished, after all of them have finished their very brief talks. But then we want to open it up for your comments and questions. Feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat anytime. I will be monitoring that. But because we have a relatively smallish group today, I think we can, after our speakers have finished their short talks, open it up. You can unmute yourself to speak if you wish. If you don't want to do that, please feel free. You can always use the chat. So Scott, would you launch? He's right on top of it before I even said it. So go ahead and answer these quick polls, if you would. I'm answering them myself. Let's take a couple moments to let those results come in. We just want to have an idea of sort of who's on the call today, whether we have Summon over Alma or a 360, and sort of what everyone's level of experience is. And Scott, whenever you have if you have those results, if enough people have responded, can you put that up on the screen for us? Fantastic. Can y'all see the poll results? Just making sure. Okay, I see a couple nods. Okay, so we have some Alma libraries. We have, looks like more 360 with us today. And a pretty wide variety of experience, looks like, with Summon Analytics, which is sort of what I expected. And lots of different roles going on. Okay, so if everyone's had a chance to look at those results, I'm closing them off of my screen. And let's turn it over to our first speaker, Angela from Yale, and each speaker will introduce herself. So take it away, Angela.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. I'm going to start with an apology. I am not in my office. I am in another building in a group study space, which apparently is not soundproof. So if you hear anyone else talking while I'm talking, my apologies, because I can hear the entire conversation next door. But we'll do our best and hopefully not make it confusing. So hi, I'm Angela Sidman. I'm the Director of E-Resources and Serials Management at Yale University Library. My group is responsible for the full life cycle of all things licensed and continuing. So that means full responsibility for Yale's large collection of e-resources, plus a substantial number of print journals. And as part of our role in that life cycle, we partner with Library IT and are directly managing 360 and Sidman. And for us, Sidman is locally branded as Articles Plus. And to understand how we use analytics, I think it's important to understand how we're using Sidman. So you can see in the screenshot our primary discovery interface, which is called Quick Search, which is blacklight. And this brings together a number of results from different data sources. This is our sort of multi-result screen. And on the left is the results box for what we call Books Plus, which is our Voyager catalog merged with the Law Library's Innovative catalog. And on the right is the results box for Books Plus, which is of course Sidman. We are using the API to bring in an initial results set for article discovery. And because we only bring in the top 3 results in this display, it's pre-filtered to make it more relevant to what people might expect side by side with a book's display. And so it's pre-filtered to show just scholarly and peer-reviewed journal results. And then if people would like to see more, they can click on the full results and go out to the native Sidman interface for further discovery. And I think what's important about understanding this is that we are API users, and that because of this interface, we do not ingest our catalog into Sidman. It is really just for what's in the 360 knowledge base and for e-resource discovery. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. We've seen how my institution is using Sidman, so I can say a little bit about how I use Sidman and 360 analytics within my role. One of the important things that I do every year is keep annual baseline statistics for e-resource collection and usage activities. And these really help me track changes in my group's work and tell the story of what's happening in my area so that I can have conversations about capacity, resources, staffing, all of that. And so there's a group of numbers that I collect related to collections, which is, things like the number of licenses that enter our tracking workflow, the percentage of the general collection budget expenditures, which are spent on e-resources and serials each year, the number of invoices paid in my area, things like that, sort of on the collection side. And I also collect a number of high-level discovery numbers. And on that list are 2 that are of interest to this group. Every year, I capture the number of Articles Plus sessions that were run and the number of open URL searches. And these are kind of high-level basic stats that don't really, how I would run them don't change, right? They're really very much canned reports, but I'm able to pull them and track them year over year and to see what's happening within our systems. And then beyond that, sort of on the access and discovery side, I also track the number of databases on our database list, the number of troubleshooting tickets we receive, easy proxy sessions, and counter statistics for the number of full text journal article downloads. And when you take all of those together, it tells the story of how many new resources we are acquiring each year that my group will manage, in addition to the substantial existing online collection that, as everyone knows, is moving, changing, that people are using all the time. And it really helps me with my responsibilities for strategy and for planning to be able to talk about the collection as we are building it and as it's being accessed and used. Beyond that set of baseline stats, I also regularly use Sidman and 360 analytics to answer specific questions that come up sort of in the course of my work. And to do that, I think one of the things that's really helpful is just to have a general sense of which reports are available so that when questions come up, I'm able to access them as needed. And so some sample reports that I've used, maybe in the last year or so, we are working on a redesign of that landing page for quick search that you saw in the previous slide, and have been able to use some Sidman reports to really help us make some informed decisions and do some informed testing for that. I used in the last year the report about how users interact with filters within native summon, which was interesting to see as we thought about how we might change positioning for filters within our own kind of first level discovery interface. I regularly look at summon just to see the search log and to see what people have been looking for and to harvest some useful searches we might employ in testing as we are rolling out changes. And finally, I pulled a really helpful 360 report not that long ago about the top journals that were being clicked through on the journal A to Z list. And that was really helpful as we are looking at a change in our Books Plus, in our catalog index, the Solar index that runs behind that, which is going to allow us to make more targeted boosts to how journals float to the top in our results display, and particularly for things like nature or science or cell, where it is a single word that could easily get lost in a keyword search, but the journal itself is so pivotal, we wanted to be able to boost those. And so seeing the top searched journals in the journal portal was really helpful and helped inform which titles got a boost within our catalog. The last way that I really use Summon and 360 Analytics is in a way as a cross-check. As we roll out changes, we have a complex discovery kind of environment, right, with native Summon, the API, quick search, 360 link, right, lots of things kind of interacting with one another. And so it's really important to us that we have Google Analytics on all of these interfaces so that we can see what users are doing, how changes impact choices, where we might want to make changes in labeling or menus or things of that nature. And Summon and 360 Analytics have been really helpful over the years as a cross-check when we are bringing up new Google Analytics to confirm that each is set up correctly. And so that is a kind of a funny side case, but a place where those Summon and 360 Analytics have really been a helpful check for us as we are doing other work related to analytics. So that's an overview of how I use Summon and 360 Analytics within my role. I'm looking forward to hearing more from the next two panelists and to discussing after. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Angela. And Jackie is up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Wrosch from Eastern Michigan University. I'm really excited to be here today, too. I'm actually looking forward to the discussion more than actually telling you about how we do things or don't do things where I'm at. We've been on Summon since about 2010. We moved to Alma in 2017 from Voyager, and at the time, I think we were one of the first libraries to kind of do that combination, but I think we have about, I think it said about 25% of our attendees today are running that. So I think that sometimes presents its own challenges. So we don't have 360, which Angela mentioned, throughout hers, kind of comparing that she pulls stuff from both. So we don't have that. We're strictly in Summon Analytics. We do use Alma Analytics. And so I'll kind of mention a couple of things about how those are different. Our discovery includes everything. We ingest our catalog, our institutional repository, our subject guides, everything else that's in the index. We have a single search that you see here, but we don't use the API at all like Yale does. So that's a little bit different. My role at Eastern is I'm the systems librarian. So a lot of my focus is kind of the backend configurations and supporting, pulling reports to support people who are making other kinds of decisions and that sort of thing. We have a digital presence team that includes librarians and staff from across our different functional areas that actually make decisions on how we do interface changes. And so that's kind of the group that looks more at that public interface more than I do individually. So I go to the next slide. So how have we used analytics? we really aren't power users. It's really more occasional. Probably the most regular thing is when we do our annual reporting, kind of library-wide annual reporting, where we're reporting across all the different things that we do, from gate counts to counter usage. We do kind of simple sessions and searches from Summon kind of thing as just one of the many things that are included in there. We don't do a lot of analysis of that, how it changes throughout the year or even from year to year so much. It's more just a reporting out for that specific document that is put together. We've used it a little bit when we've considered interface changes with our digital presence team. The one that really kind of sticks out is when we look at our facets and looking how our users actually use them, or what we really see is how they don't use them beyond the defaults that we kind of apply right there in the beginning. So that's always kind of eye-opening when we look at that as a group. And then occasionally we'll have some of our subject specialists who'll have questions about the kinds of searches that are being done. So we'll maybe pull something for them on occasion. But all of these things, when they're done, it's usually me pulling it for someone else. It's not someone else going in and using analytics. So next slide. And then, so this kind of leads me into what I've kind of found are some of the barriers that I've encountered using Summon Analytics in particular. I mentioned we also use Alma Analytics, and it's the same OAS interface that we use to run reports and that sort of thing. But our Summon Analytics and our Alma Analytics are completely separate instances. Seems like there might be a way to do things kind of combined, so we could look at things holistically, but there's really not. And so it's really kind of separated that way. One of the things that's nice about our Alma Analytics is I can go in and build reports and then put them on our Alma desktop for whenever someone logs in, and actually push reports like through a widget, or even schedule an email to them over that. And we really haven't been able to do that with our Summon Analytics in the same kind of way. And I mentioned that I do a lot of that report building and stuff, and it's not that we don't want other people to do it. A lot of times they would prefer to have someone else do it for them. But the way that we get into the Summon admin interface is many clicks away. We have to go through Alma to actually even get to Summon, and then into Analytics. The way that our permissions are set up, it's kind of like we would have to give someone access to all of our discovery configuration, the part that lives in Alma as well as the part that lives in Summon. And it's not that we're really opposed to that. It's just there's no real granularity to giving different permissions to different people. So that's really kind of, I feel like, why we haven't, pulled it into the rest of our the reporting and assessment that we do with our other products. A couple other things I just wanted to mention that we've noticed. I said missing data. I'm not sure if it's missing or it's counted in another way. According to Summon Analytics, we've never had anyone use our advanced search screen, which I don't think is possible. So is it being counted as a basic search? Is it not being counted? Are we different because we're Summon over Alma, which can happen? I've never really dug into why that is, kind of thing. But it's just some of the things that we've noticed. And then also some of the data that we would like to see or be interested in just isn't collected. We have best bets that we're interested in, how often those kinds of things are used, that we don't really, we don't see any data on that. And even in the past, not so much recently, but we've tried to do some. We'd like to see how the Summon direct linking is how often that is happening, kind of thing. And that's not really there at all for us to look at. So I guess kind of just summarizing, we haven't made great use of it. We'd like to make better use of it. We just haven't really found a good way to make it more accessible to everyone who's interested in what's going on in Summon Analytics. So thank you very much. Looking forward to questions.
Thanks, Jackie. And next up we have Áine.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Áine Lynch. I am the Assistant Librarian for Systems and Electronic Resources in Mary Immaculate College in Limerick in Ireland. We are using Summon over Alma too. And we have a relatively small library. So there's 20 library staff and 5,000 student FTEs. So we're definitely not at the level of Yale or Eastern Michigan. So it's a much smaller organization that we're working from. So our students will study mainly primary and secondary level teaching and liberal arts. So I'm going to admit straight up that I'm here with more questions than answers. I'm looking forward to the discussion too. So thanks for that. So we'll just have a next slide, please, if that's okay. Just a quick look at our history. MIC moved to Summon over Alma in September 2020, but we had used Summon before that. We've been using Summon for years, so we were familiar with analytics and reports from before. The way that we had used it traditionally was both day-to-day and kind of in the broader administrative planning kind of sense. So on a day-to-day basis, we my colleague Kate is the library assistant. She was particularly involved. So she used to find useful data for teaching. So she would find 0 result examples for our user services librarian, and then he would use those in the classroom to kind of demonstrate. They're very timely, they're very relevant. They kind of demonstrate that searching your full citation isn't going to give you good results. Whereas he could show popular search strings and how kind of fast it's aided, as Jackie was saying, how fast it's aided searching. And it was a very kind of a real way of teaching. Another kind of day-to-day way we used the data was within the link resolver in 360, there's a report a problem finding this item button. We found that really useful. So rather than waiting on reports at the end of the week or the end of the month, we were kind of getting those reports in real time. And again, our library assistant was able to follow up with systems librarian or the vendor to try and fix those issues. And then I guess in a broader way, more strategic way, the way most people use it, I guess, monitoring collection development, looking at usage stats before renewing databases, things like that. So that's kind of how we used Summon when we had it previously. Now, when we moved to Summon over Alma, it definitely brought some changes in how we worked. It's very useful to have Summon embedded in our LMS, and hopefully that will grow and become improve all the time. But there was definitely challenges, particularly with the day-to-day use. Jackie already mentioned that the high-level permission required kind of prevents our library assistants from doing work that they did before. So some of that day-to-day reporting is kind of harder to do now. We're still doing some of the more higher level. But one of the ways, again, as Jackie mentioned, is the possibility of scheduling Summon reports, I think would be huge for us. I think Alma Analytics and Leganto Analytics have been absolutely amazing since we joined, and to be able to schedule those reports would really change the way that we use Summon Analytics. Our other challenge that I was going to mention is less directly related to Summon Analytics. It's more about it's more about the information that underlies it, the information that underlies our use of Summon Analytics, or sometimes are not using Summon Analytics. It kind of, in some ways, Summon Analytics has really helped us to understand the underlying data better, which has been really good for us. But I guess the reason that I'm kind of happy to be here today is that I'd love to know if other people have had these issues before and approached them differently and found answers that I'm not finding. To be very honest, I tend to use vendor data or vendor usage data more than Summon data. Someone would be great in terms of comparing across vendors. So if we had 3 psychology databases, it would be great to be looking at usage in one kind of space rather than looking at 3 different vendors. So we would really like to use Summon data. But one of the issues that we found is that it's not being used to the same extent as we kind of expected. So for some categories of user, like postgrads and researchers, completely accept that it's normal to go into the database to search within the database. That's how we would encourage people to use it and so on. But we're finding the difference between the stats kind of broader than we think. And to some extent, I'm worried that one of the issues that might be causing that is a lot of the times where we have title level access rather than article level access. I think that is not that doesn't cause users to continue using it. Can we go on to the next slide there, please? This is far from scientific, but it's my kind of way of trying to explain what I mean. I've taken 3 databases that I would expect to be used by our undergrads. As I said, they're student teachers and liberal arts students. And so they would use databases like Education Source, Communication Source, Academic Source Complete a lot. And when I look, I used the sessions metric as a comparison because I think that's the closest to both measuring the same thing essentially, even with the definitions there. Otherwise it's kind of hard to compare, but the differences, the gaps feel bigger than would just be kind of that we have postgrads using going directly to the database. The gaps seem quite big. And so part of me wonders whether that is down to, for instance, Communication Source is a title level, is indexed at title level. So the student searches for the article, they get the journal back, and then they have to navigate through to the volume and the issue. And I'm wondering if that makes someone less conducive to use. And I guess the reason why we're kind of probably even hyper aware of these things at the moment is because we've been integrating Leganto, the reading list software, and our staff are really involved with adding citations, and so they are facing a lot of the issues that maybe our students face sometimes too, and they're seeing these firsthand. So I was hoping that this working group, in addition to looking at improving tools and improving functionality within Google, within Summon Analytics, could also possibly look at kind of a collective way of advocating for the data that underlies, for using analytics to look at our data more critically, I guess, in terms of what can we do, how can we use analytics to improve access to our resources, for instance. I'm conscious that only 25% of the users are Alma users, so I'm sorry if this isn't relevant to everybody else, but for me, it's been a great opportunity to kind of ask the question and to bring it out there. So thanks to the working group for allowing me to voice that, and thanks to the Summon Over Alma support staff who've been brilliant at kind of getting us to this point and understanding. Thank you.
Thanks, Áine. Bear with me for just a moment while I press some buttons here. I'm going to stop sharing and turn on my video, and I need to rearrange a couple things so I can see the chat and everything. Thank you so much to our all of our discussion leaders. I'm going to start kind of looking through the chat here, and there was a question. The first question is for Jackie, and I think you may have already answered it in the chat. What would a report for a subject specialist look like? How do you run the report, and what data you're pulling? And you mentioned popular searches and 0 results in analytics and using the terminology specified by the subject specialist. Did that answer the question, or would you like to elaborate on that, Jackie?
I don't have any elaboration, but so I
Okay.
think the person responded in the chat too.
Okay, I'm probably just catching up because I've yes, and Jim mentioned that some of Jackie's wish list items may already be in the ID exchange. Please do go check that out. And Angela provided a link to the ID exchange. We highly recommend going in there voting, because that is one really good way to get enhancements done. Okay, so I see another question in the chat. I wonder if each article full text call from within Summon is counted as a separate session by the vendor. Does anyone know the answer to that?
I wonder if that's why I'm getting different statistics. If that's, I'm not entirely sure if that's what's meant there. It's very possible. I guess one of the real advantages of Alma Analytics working really well for us is we'd be comparing like with like. So cross vendor, that's why we'd love to get Summon Analytics working really well for us, so that we could kind of not be kind of comparing different things.
Yes, any other comments on that? And we do have some ex libris staff. I'm not going to put them on the spot, but they should feel free if they know the answer to these questions. Please, do jump in. Go ahead, Brent.
I was about to say, you could put me on the spot if you want to. That's kind of why I'm here. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. I do not have an answer whatsoever. So, and first off, let me just say thank you so much to everyone who presented. You talked about how you wanted to see the questions as well, but I was thrilled and delighted to hear what you said and what you're using and shortcomings as well. That's a fascinating question, and it's something that we could certainly work on. Overall with the analytics, I can say and this is my personal feelings about the system and whatnot, is that they have languished for a while and that we need to do more with them. I ages ago got my start in doing e-commerce sites like in the 90s, and the ability to sort of track someone's, so everything there is about the shopping cart, right? How do you get people in the shopping cart, and where do they lose it, and the same thing applies to users is for Summon, for this type of research, right? Because you want to know, did they get to that thing they wanted, or did they get lost along the way? And then if you see where they got lost, maybe they didn't get lost, maybe they got their answer before they got to that end piece of content, in which case then you want to just understand your user paths. And I wish that we had more intelligence around that, but when we built this out, it was really around searches, facets, uses of that. And so that's kind of my long-winded way of saying I want to see us do more with the user interface, which Jackie, that would do things like the best bets and bring in topic explorer and custom panels, but you'd need a way to sort of like tag that instance, right? Because you create your own best bets. Like searches are easy because they all go to the same place. We know how the things come in, right? And then but with things on the page, we need to tag them. And so I would love to see us add that. And those are, if they're not on the ID Exchange, please add them and know that we want to work to improve those. And I'm meeting now with the analytics working group from time to time, and I want to make sure that we stay on top of that. Which, to circle back to the original thing, which is what's that difference between providers versus our links, and does it include full text versus not? I can't answer that right now. And I think one of the things that would be fascinating is if we could find a provider that we could work with closely, because they could also tell us like referring URLs to their content. So maybe somebody through Summon goes and visits the content and then bookmarks it, for example. That could, over a week, they may come once from Summon, but then they may need to go back like 3 other times and read that article. And so they go direct from the bookmark. And that would count for 4 clicks on their side and 1 click on our side. And so, the way to do that is for them to look at their records and ours to look at ours and say, where's this delta coming from? And it could be as simple as somebody mentioned, it could be the way we count things as well. So anyway, I don't want to monopolize time. So I see Angela has a hand up, and I'll be quiet, and please feel free to rope me in where you need to.
Go ahead, Angela.
Thanks. Actually, once Brent volunteered to put himself on the spot, I do have a question for Brent, and it touches on sort of pain points and how we're using the enhancement process. And can you talk for us a little about maybe which groups are managing changes to the Summon interface or functionality and the relationship to the analytics group? Like, is there a tight handshake there? Because it feels like sometimes one of the gaps we fall into is, for instance, as we've moved further into using indexed enhanced direct linking, right? There was a gap where we needed to wait, and it's still kind of hard to see what traffic is moving that way rather than through open URL, but we still want to see the traffic, right? And now that we have quick links and PDFs in the results set, right, there's real interest in being able to see who's just going directly to full text. What is the handshake like on the back end so that as these features that really change how traffic moves through our systems are released, that analytics follow? Is that a good handshake, or is there no?
Good handshake. It's a milk toast handshake. I mean, it's like be 100% transparent around it. So the UI and the API developers are a separate team from the analytics developers, and they work with the analytics team to develop out any features. And here's where I'm like sort of going, that sort of thing. It comes from sort of something that we did at the beginning of this entire project, and it actually started even before Summon came on board with OBI at the time, and now OAS. And that is, and it's a good philosophy, but it adds challenges, and that is the idea that we're going to create one analytics system for all Ex Libris products so that we can connect the dots across the platform as much as we can, so that if you're using Leganto, and if you're using, Alma, and if you're using, whatnot, that you can just ping pong back and forth between them and say, look, here's how things operate in all those systems. Excellent philosophy, not as easy to execute on. And when you get, a square peg and you've designed the hole already and it's round, then you're like, well, we'll just shave the edges off this square peg and all will be good, right? And that's kind of where you get Leganto, analytics. You're like, wow, this is brilliant. And then you look at something and go, why don't they have the same things there? And it's because this sort of lining up of things isn't quite right. So we've acknowledged this internally. There's this thing called a beacon, which is the sort of, and sorry to get a little technical in a minute, but it kind of can help understand things. And that is this sort of thing that sits out there and watches all Ex Libris products and says, oh, there's a piece of data for me to grab. Oh, and just, keeps the tally marks, right? And so we have to add things to the beacon in order to get them tallied. And then we have to line them up. And so in the past, there has been some situations where we're like, oh, we want to add this, little tally on the beacon, and we get kind of wrapped around the axle, because it's like, wait a minute, is that the same as this tick mark that's over here? How do we align them? Well, if you change your definition a little bit this way, Brent, then we can do the same across everybody. Yeah, that's like 90% of what you want, and and so it sort of ends up with that sort of piece. And again, we realize, because we have like the automatic scheduling and emailing of stuff, breaking out advanced search from basic search, which, by the way, those are tracked, but it just all shows up as search, and you can't tell how many are basic versus advanced. All of those have been outstanding requests, and we need to get to those. And so we have taken a look at that sort of philosophy of how we do the analytics to hopefully, break free of that logjam and do a better job. And please hold my feet to the fire. Make sure that the analytics group is saying what's going on with analytics. I mean, a bunch of folks here on the working group, knock on my door and say, hey, what are we doing this quarter to help out with the analytics? And there will be you're going to put me into lots of uncomfortable conversation spots where I'm having to go like, but that's where we should be, because quite frankly, there's just some things that with some polish, we can get this low hanging fruit, and we can extend it and do more with it. And again, as somebody who came from e-commerce, I know how much it can help you, which is, again, with teaching, educating, understanding. Like people were talking about, not using the facets. Now that we've changed the facet to pane in December, I'm excited about want to see are people seeing anything different or not. So I'd like to see those things added as well, and together we can get there.
Thanks, Brent. We have a really interesting question in the chat. Have you noticed a decrease in 0 results with the change to summon spell correction searching?
Yeah, so just for anybody who might not know, we used to search on the incorrect spelling and provide a link for them to correct it if they'd like, and we flip-flop that, which is what Google and all other search engines do these days. They automatically go, oh, you didn't mean to spell tomorrow wrong. I'm admitting now I can't keep track of how many R's and W's are in tomorrow when I type, but and it corrects that for me nicely. So
anybody on the call who looks at that 0 result searches, have you noticed any change in that? I confess I haven't looked at that report in a while, so I'm kind of in a struggle myself where I go and retrieve the data, but I don't really know what to do with it yet. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I'm going to kind of make a mental note to go look at my own stats for that. So we have another question in the chat. I'd be curious to know what the panelists are using to aggregate their vendor counter stats, if anything.
I can start with that question. We put substantial resources towards aggregating counter statistics. We use the 360 DRS functionality, that service that does the retrieval, the data retrieval service, must be what DRS stands for. So we use the data retrieval service so that twice a year we get stats from 360. They are, ProQuest Ex Libris is out there gathering them for us at the half-year basis, and then we get a full replace with full-year statistics at the end of the year. We have seen over time a diminishing number of vendors that we can actually use that for, as more and more vendors have put multi-factor authentication into place, and we need to actually be on our own IP addresses to harvest those. So we see what we can get as much as possible from DRS, see what the gap is. We get the rest of that, those counter stats manually. We are also gathering non-counter stats for all the things we do that give us those. And then e-resources and serials management partners with our assessment and user experience group. And we pull that data into SQL database and then into Tableau. And we do that for journals and for databases. And it's really powerful because it allows us to see the same journal on all of the platforms on which we get it rather than broken out by each provider. And it also allows us to track usage trends over time. So we keep the most recent 5 years of data viewable within Tableau, and we refresh that annually. So that's what we're doing for journals and databases. Ebooks are, we don't have as clear a read on what might be useful. Brent often talks in talking about analytics about how there are some stats where they are help you with decision makings, and other stats where you just say, like, that's neat. And I feel like our ebook stats, we are still in the that's neat phase. And so we gather all of them and have them, but don't put them into Tableau. We tend to do more specialized analysis if there's a question about something we are thinking about doing or a change we're thinking about making. So that's how we're aggregating and where we are displaying them and making them available widely to about, I'd say 40 subject librarians so that they can all see what's happening in their areas.
Anything else on that topic? Doesn't have to be just from the panelists. If others would like to jump in, we have a small enough group here. Please feel free to unmute yourself and join in. If not, I will just mention circling back to the zero title reports, a comment from the chat. I think we'd have to do some kind of content analysis on those to see what kinds of changes, if any, there may be. And to mention at Ball State, they are summon over Alma, and Alma's sushi harvesting works very well for them. So I'm scrolling through the chat really quick. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share a comment or a question. I know we have different experience levels here with analytics. So if there's anyone who's maybe struggling to get started, I will mention that we do have some resources on the slides, which we'll share. There's some really good recordings and presentation slides and other things that that may help people get started. But oh, Jim, did you have your hand up and I missed it? Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I was just going to elaborate a little bit on what I said about summon or Alma's sushi harvesting. If you are, if you do have Alma, I can't recommend highly enough spending the time, and it does take time, configuring your 80 or 3,000 vendors for sushi harvesting. It really does solve the kind of problem Angela mentioned with the 360 and Total DRS service, which we used for years. And it did work very well until more vendors started beefing up their security. But sushi Sushi gets around that. There are a few vendors that are kind of cranky, about the setup, slight differences among them. But once you have it set up, make sure to monitor it. Make sure you're actually getting data. But it does work. Does work really well, and it at least has put us closer to a position where we could say, yeah, here's how our e-resources are actually getting used, and we're relatively confident that the numbers are meaningful. So.
Thanks for that. And if I have missed someone's hand being raised, I apologize. And please feel free to unmute yourself and talk. I have a few questions that I'm interested in hearing about. Anyone on the call, please feel free to jump in. I'm curious if someone has a favorite report in Summon Analytics that you have, maybe you've found very useful, you learned something really interesting about your users that surprised you, or that you used to make a decision of some sort. And we have another question from the chat. I think this is for Angela. This person has never heard of Blacklight before and wants to know why you decided to go with Blacklight instead of Summon for your discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. So that decision was made right around the time I started at Yale in 2013-ish. But my understanding of how it was made was that due to the diversity and complexity of the library's collections, having something where it was like a Summon or a Primo, where we were ingesting the catalog, would leave out a lot of what is special about our collections, that there are massive special collections, massive holdings in archives and manuscripts, a lot of digital work, and that being able to highlight that, the sort of the things that are unique that only exist here was really important. And so Blacklight allows us to do that while also putting a spotlight on the general collections like e-resources that are really sort of bread and butter, high usage, right? Everyone is always using JSTOR and Science Direct and writing the same things as everything else, but to also have that in the same frame as some of the things that are really special and just live here. And so I think it's a much more common choice at large research institutions. So we use the same code as Columbia. Michigan uses a version of the same code to pull in Summon results next to sort of all the other good stuff that the library has to offer its researchers.
Thanks, Angela, and thanks for that question. So we have about 12 minutes left. This is your chance to ask those burning analytics questions.
I actually have a question, and maybe this is for you, Susan, but about what happens after our discussion here.
That is a really excellent question. So of course we are going to share this recording and the slides that we have. I would love to see this conversation continue in many different ways. I hope that we get some more votes, more ideas on the idea exchange for one thing. If there's conversation that can happen on the Summon list, that would be excellent. If there's interest in another session sponsored by the Summon 360 working group, I'm your girl. I can work with Ex Libris staff to help get that set up. I would be very, very happy to do that. This session is sort of an experiment because in the past, we've typically done more traditional webinars with longer presentations. If you like the discussion format and want to see more of that, I'd love to hear that as well. So I think I saw someone unmute. I believe it was Wendy, and sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but go ahead.
Sorry, that was the wrong button. Didn't mean to do that.
No worries. Sorry, I put you on the spot. Yeah, how, Jackie and anyone else, how would you like to see this continue? Do we need more introductory training on analytics? Do people need that? Do we need to hear more about how to use it for making decisions? I think that's my personal struggle at the moment, because I'm looking at it. I know how to create reports or use canned reports, edit canned reports. I haven't really tried making one from scratch with Summon Analytics yet, but so I feel fairly comfortable in kind of massaging to get different dates or things like that. But I'm kind of not quite sure. Well, what do I do? This is all interesting, but I'm not really sure what to do with it. If others are in the same boat, maybe we can go in that direction. Do people need help getting started? Would love to know what the needs are.
I wonder about subject-specific guidance, so that perhaps user services might have different needs from, say, collections or systems, and maybe kind of getting staff together based on kind of how they're really going to use it rather than how theoretically it could be used. That might be one approach.
I agree. And at my institution, and it's not because people are not interested, but it's just because we tend to be understaffed in the public, well, in every area, but I don't work directly with users, and the people that do, it's hard to get people together to have that conversation and find it and ask them, what do you want to know about what would help you as you're working with users in this summon data, and it's just because everyone is so busy. It's a challenge to have that conversation. I think I saw someone unmute. Go ahead.
Yes, this is going to be a messy question. Two of the trends that I'm kind of a little bit concerned about that we're seeing just anecdotally, one of them is open source packages where some articles within a journal are available, but a vast majority are not, and how to actually provide access so that students aren't frustrated by getting all the articles that they can't actually use. And the second that's a little bit related is the whole practice where publishers are starting to publish articles in preprint because it's taking preprint versions because it's taking so long for them to actually get published. And I'm wondering if anyone has any experience or advice whether or not that's actually kind of bubbling to the top through any of the analytics in a way that it's useful that you can track it or try to figure out how to resolve those issues.
Can I say, I definitely don't know the answer to the question, but I feel like within ALMA anyway, I feel like some of the collections are being used by both aggregators and publishers. And so aggregators don't make those preprints available, but publishers do. So I think that's one of the ways that maybe we could look at it within ALMA. I don't know if that's true of other, but like if those collections were duplicated, so there was a collection for the aggregator and a collection for the publisher, then those preprints could be filtered out. At the moment, it feels like they can't be filtered out, which is definitely frustrating.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that question either, but I think that's a valuable question. Would anyone else like to chime in on that?
I love the question. It's a big question, and I think it's a growing increasingly complex question. In terms of analytics, you know, we can kind of bring ourselves back to points that were made earlier in the session about things that are not currently counted. And we're looking at a new, well, this year we've seen new features in Summon for new linking options. And there's at least one, maybe two more pretty big enhancements coming later this year. One of which would better provide better linking to open access, for instance. Yet, that's probably not going to be reflected at all in Summon analytics at this point either. So it's kind of a knotty issue all around, but I think it's one that we can recognize as something we'd like to be solved, like to see solved long term. So.
Yes, and I want to highlight something that came in the chat, a suggestion that we would all benefit from idea sharing, basically building on the idea of what do I do with this data, and asking if there's interest in sharing your top 5 favorite reports and why is the data useful and meaningful. I like that idea. I think we'll, I will take that back to the working group and see, you know, if we can continue to build on this. And let's see, Angela has provided a link to an idea exchange on labeling open access linking. And another comment from the chat impacting the OA article access question. We found problems stemming from the fact that we need to assign OA status, for example, proxy or not proxy at the collection level in the KB. I think this collection level designation of OA also impacts analytics, and we haven't found a workaround yet. I can't speak to that, and I would. We've got just a couple minutes left, so if anyone wants to jump in. Yes, I think we'll be able to capture the chat as well. I hope for this so that we don't lose any of these questions or ideas.
Yeah, I was going to say that
Yeah,
some of these are some questions that it would be interesting to get, you know, to do what we call a consult with the development team, get somebody to take a look at it. Maybe we can get a little bit more information or answers there. So,
okay.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, another comment, it is complicated because some of us are using ALMA and some 360. Yes, and these sessions, we want to be open to both of those scenarios. We don't want to, you know, we don't want to exclude, because Summon is the thing tying us together. Managing OA in the KB would be a great future discussion topic. Yeah, let's, if I forget that, you remind me. Since we are getting close to the time, I will quickly, if I can, just bring the slides back up for a moment, just to make note that we do have some resources linked in the slides. Several people have mentioned Google Analytics and using that in conjunction with Summon Analytics. And I would like to highlight Tabitha Farney's wonderful publication here as a great resource to get started with that. We have other things linked. These are going to be shared, so don't worry about capturing everything. I will put my contact information up on the screen for just a moment. And I would encourage anyone to get in touch with me. I would love to hear feedback on this session, more ideas for future sessions on analytics or anything else. And I will stop sharing again. And we have just 1 minute left. So I would like to thank our discussion leaders very, very much for sharing your experiences. Thank you to Scott and Brent and others from Ex Libris who joined this, and I'm sure we're taking notes. And thank you all to the participants who joined us for this sort of experimental little thing and for kind of going with the flow with us. I hope that you'll join us again and look for more announcements on the Summon list. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day or evening.